Well, I think first of all, the very fact that Malaysia was able to convince both sides to come to the negotiating table in Malaysia is an achievement. And that's undeniable because it shows that despite the differences, the political differences that may exist among ASEAN member states, and despite the occurrence of tension and even hostility among some ASEAN states, the fact that both Thailand and Cambodia could be convinced by Malaysia to come to the negotiating table in an ASEAN country underscores the fact that the principle of ASEAN Centrality is still very relevant. And I think in the sense, this was an achievement not only for Malaysia, but it was also an achievement for ASEAN. Because it would be, for me, very disappointing if the negotiations were held outside ASEAN, say in Washington or Beijing or Moscow or whatever, because it would seem to suggest that the countries of ASEAN do not have faith in the mechanisms that ASEAN have put in place. So in this respect, I think this was all round, a very positive outcome. It says a lot about Malaysia's ability to convince member states that our problems, our issues in the ASEAN region ought to be handled by ASEAN members themselves in ASEAN. And it also says a lot about the two countries, Thailand and Cambodia, that were willing to come to negotiate in a neutral third country within the ASEAN region. So all in all, I would say that this is a very positive outcome. And I think, of course, other countries might want to claim credit for it, but the fact remains that, this was an issue that affected the countries of ASEAN primarily, and in the end, the countries that came together and the country that organized this were all ASEAN members. So I think we tend to forget that ASEAN has played a very important role in maintaining peace and stability in this part of the world for decades now. ASEAN is almost 60 years old. And I think for that reason, despite the talk of trade wars, geopolitical conflicts or what have you, ASEAN is still very much a relevant body. And I think credit should go to Malaysia for upholding this principle. Because for me, the principle of ASEAN Centrality is a very, very important principle that we should all abide by. And I think it's important that the countries, in this case, the two countries that were at odds with one another, recognize that this is an issue that does affect the rest of the region, right? So I think for us who live in Southeast Asia, we should, I think, be thankful that an outcome has been reached, and it's been a positive one. I think what the recent peace accord between Thailand and Cambodia shows us is that if and when the affected countries are willing to go down the path of negotiation and resolution, then we can achieve possible positive outcomes. And I think in the case of the conflict that we see in Myanmar now, that is a very complex conflict because it's an internal civil conflict, although it also has geopolitical implications because there are external actors involved as well. Now I think here it is important for Myanmar as a member of ASEAN to recognize that whatever issues it's facing, these issues, such conflicts, do have an impact on the rest of the region. And this is the price that all member states have to pay, because when you join ASEAN, you recognize the fact that although you hold on to the principle of sovereignty, national sovereignty and self-determination, if and when issues like this emerge, civil conflict or what have you, these will have an impact on your neighbors. And so there is a sense of obligation that all member states ought to have, that they must be aware of the fact that if and when their domestic problems have a regional impact, they are, in a sense, obligated to work with their neighbors, because we are immediately affected by what happens in Myanmar. So I hope that this resolution that we see now between Thailand and Cambodia will be another example of how ASEAN can move forward. And this is going to be very important because ASEAN Centrality will become more and more important in the years and decades to come, because as we all know, right, our region is strategically and economically, very vital to the global economy, and the whole world is watching us. So it's incumbent upon all the states of ASEAN to try their best to play by the rules of the game, the ASEAN rules of the game. And so I hope that we will not relent in our efforts to bring about some kind of meaningful, lasting stability and peace for Myanmar. Because it's not simply stability for Myanmar, it's stability for ASEAN as well. It would be the responsibility of any country that happens to be the chair, that holds the chairmanship of ASEAN at that time. And so, of course, with the chairmanship comes an enormous amount of responsibility, particularly in times of crisis. And of course, I think Malaysia has taken this responsibility very seriously because we know what it entails. Yeah? And I think the same would apply to any country that would be the chair of ASEAN at any particular time. Of course, the problem arises if at that point in time, a country that is the chair of ASEAN is also involved in conflict, because then it compromises its ability to behave in an objective and neutral manner. I think the advantage that Malaysia had at this time was that we are on good terms with all these countries, and I think it was important to convey the impression that we would be an honest broker in this negotiation. And thankfully, I think we are all thankful for the fact that it has yielded positive results, and we hope that this peace will be a lasting one. I think any country that is a member of ASEAN must also recognize the limitations that it has. Yeah? We are all members of ASEAN. The member states of ASEAN belong to an association that was put together in 1967 with the intention of ensuring a viable and lasting peace in our region, because we are all trading nations, and for trade to happen, we need stability and continuity. Now, beyond ASEAN, of course, whether any country in Southeast Asia can play, a role in, say, a conflict in South Asia or Central Asia or East Asia or now, that, of course, will depend on a host of variables, to what extent that country is known, to what extent that country is accepted. So, beyond the ASEAN region, I think our remit or our influence, might diminish somewhat. But that's natural, because we are not hegemonic powers and we have no hegemonic ambitions. ASEAN, you have to remember, was something that was on the one hand inclusive and exclusive at the same time, because our primary focus, the foundation of ASEAN itself, remember in 1967, was to ensure that this part of the world, Southeast Asia, would not be dragged into wider geopolitical conflicts of the Cold War. Right. And so that has been our mandate, that our primary intention is to ensure stability for us. So in the sense, on the one hand, we are inclusive. We would like all Southeast Asian states and nations to be part of ASEAN and to feel that they are members of ASEAN. But on the other hand, we have never, ASEAN as an institution has never demonstrated an inclination or desire to go beyond the borders of Southeast Asia. So that's why, if you look historically, our role, maybe as individual states, Malaysia's role, for example, during the Bosnian conflict, right, that was taken unilaterally by Malaysia. Indonesia has done the same, Thailand has done the same, depending on the circumstances, because I think all the countries, we are not homogeneous. Yeah? Different countries have different profiles and they have different alliances. Some countries are closer to East Asia, some countries are closer to South Asia. So I think it's difficult for us to generalize that way. The main thing for me, because I'm a committed ASEANist, is I would like to see ASEAN thrive and prosper, because that is absolutely central and crucial to the welfare and the well-being of the people of Southeast Asia. Yeah? So for us, I mean, I might sound a bit biased here, but ASEAN comes first, Southeast Asia comes first. Our neighbors, our immediate neighbors, always must come first, because whatever happens, it's like if your neighbor's house is on fire, you're going to be affected, right? So you have to do something. And I think, I'm happy by the outcome of this, because it shows, despite all the criticism that ASEAN has received from outside, that, in many ways, the ASEAN spirit is still there. It might be challenged at the moment by all these geopolitical, geo-economic shifts, but to a large extent, most of the countries of Southeast Asia that are members of ASEAN still seem to know or show that ASEAN as an institution, as an association, is still relevant to us, and I think that's important. One important thing is to always cultivate an image of being an honest broker that does not have, double standards, of course. I mean, we are all familiar with the way in which, certain developed countries, on the one hand preach human rights, but then abuse human rights at the same time. So we don't have that image, and I think that's important. It's very important for us to constantly, be aware of the optics of geopolitics, how we are seen and how we present ourselves as an honest broker, as a reliable partner. These things are going to be important, regardless of who is in power, regardless of who's in power. And I think Malaysia, by and large, has demonstrated that. We have been very consistent. If you look at in the past, during the anti-apartheid struggle, even though many countries were not as vocal as Malaysia was, but Malaysia was very vocal because we took a principled stand that apartheid, institutionalized apartheid in South Africa was something that was morally unacceptable, and we never wavered from that position. And I think now, when we talk about economic inequality, political inequality, social justice, the issue of Palestine and things like that, we have been, I believe, vocal and consistent, without attempting to negotiate or play games about it. I think that consistency ultimately builds over time, a reputation for reliability and trustworthiness. And I think for that reason, the two countries, Thailand and Cambodia, probably felt that it would be wise to take up the invitation to negotiate a settlement in a country like Malaysia that has shown that it's not partisan to either one, right? And I think that's important because this would be the case in any dispute. Even if it's a marital divorce, you need a judge who doesn't favor the husband or the wife, right? So it's the same thing, right? So it's basically this constant need to manage our image and to be consistent in the positions that we take. Yeah.